The 155mm shell weighed 43 pounds. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez watched as Private Elena Hartwell approached the howitzer, her 5'4" frame dwarfed by the massive artillery piece. The betting pool among the men had already started. How long before she asked for help? How many shells she could manage before her arms gave out? Whether she'd last through the first live fire exercise? What they didn't know was that Elena had been preparing for this moment her entire life. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Fort Braxton, North Carolina, blazed under the August sun as the 2nd Artillery Battalion conducted their quarterly assessment. The sprawling military base stretched across thousands of acres of pine forests and training grounds, where the constant thunder of artillery fire had become as familiar as morning reveille. Elena Hartwell stepped off the transport truck, her desert combat boots hitting the red clay dirt with determination that masked the churning in her stomach. At 22, Elena had already defied expectations. Growing up in rural Montana on her grandfather's ranch, she'd spent her childhood hauling hay bales that outweighed her, fixing machinery with hands barely large enough to grip the tools, and proving to everyone in Millfield County that size meant nothing when matched against pure determination. Her grandfather, Thomas Hartwell, a Korean War veteran, had taught her that strength came in many forms, and the most dangerous opponents were often the ones people underestimated. The artillery unit buzzed with skepticism as Elena reported to Battery C. Captain Marcus Webb, a 20-year veteran with arms like tree trunks, looked up from his clipboard with barely concealed doubt. His weathered face, scarred from a training accident years prior, carried the expression of a man who'd seen too many recruits wash out to believe in miracles. Private Hartwell, Webb's gravelly voice cut through the ambient noise of soldiers preparing equipment. Are you sure you requested the right unit? Motor pool's that way if you're looking for lighter duty. Elena's jaw tightened, but she maintained perfect military bearing. Sir, I requested artillery, sir. I'm here to serve with the cannons. Sergeant First Class Miguel Santos, Webb's second-in-command, exchanged glances with the other non-commissioned officers. Santos had worked with the M777 howitzers for 15 years, watching countless soldiers struggle with the physical demands of artillery operations. The 155mm shells weren't just heavy, they required precise handling under extreme pressure, often while under simulated or real enemy fire. Hartwell, you understand what we do here? Santos stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd survived 3 combat deployments. This isn't about proving a point. Artillery saves lives. When infantry calls for fire support, they need it fast and accurately. No time for struggling with the equipment. Elena nodded sharply. I understand, Sergeant. I'm ready to learn. The morning's first exercise involved basic shell handling, moving ammunition from supply points to firing positions. The M795 high-explosive shells sat in neat rows, each one a precision instrument of warfare weighing more than most people's luggage. Specialist Jake Morrison, a farm boy from Iowa with shoulders broad enough to carry 2 shells simultaneously, demonstrated the standard technique. Proper form is everything, Morrison explained, his Midwestern accent thick with authority earned through repetition. Bend with your knees, keep your back straight, use your whole body. These things will destroy your spine if you try to muscle them. Elena watched intently as Morrison lifted a shell with practiced ease. Around her, the other soldiers in the exercise, Corporal David Chen from California, Private First Class Anthony Williams from Texas, and Specialist Robert Kumar from Michigan, all possessed the obvious physical advantages that came with height, weight, and upper body strength developed through years of athletics or manual labor. When Elena's turn came, she approached the shell with the careful precision her grandfather had taught her when handling heavy ranch equipment. Instead of trying to match Morrison's technique exactly, she adjusted her stance, getting lower, finding her center of gravity, and engaging muscle groups that her smaller frame could leverage more effectively. The shell rose smoothly from its position. Elena's technique looked different, more deliberate, more calculated, but undeniably effective. She carried it the required 50 meters to the firing position without strain, her breathing controlled and even. "Beginner's luck," muttered Williams under his breath, loud enough for others to hear but quiet enough to maintain plausible deniability. Captain Webb observed from a distance, making notes on his ever-present clipboard. His expression remained neutral, but Elena caught him timing her movement with his watch. The standard for shell transport was 90 seconds from pickup to proper placement in the firing position. Elena had completed it in 78 seconds. The morning progressed through various handling exercises. Elena's performance remained consistent, not the fastest in raw speed, but efficient, precise, and most importantly, sustainable. While some of the larger soldiers began showing fatigue after the 15th repetition, Elena maintained her form and pace. During the lunch break, Elena sat alone at one of the outdoor picnic tables, reviewing her field manual while eating an MRE. The technical specifications of the M77 howitzer filled the pages. Firing rates, shell types, mechanical operations that required understanding beyond just physical capability. Sergeant Santos approached, his shadow falling across Elena's open manual. "Mind if I sit?" Elena gestured to the bench across from her. Santos settled his considerable bulk onto the wooden seat, studying her with the analytical gaze of someone trying to solve a puzzle. "You've done this before," he said. It wasn't quite a question. Elena looked up from her manual. "Not artillery specifically, Sergeant, but heavy equipment, precision work under pressure, yes. Ranch work? Among other things." Elena closed the manual but kept her finger marking her place. "My grandfather always said that people see what they expect to see. They look at a small woman and see weakness. They look at a big man and see strength. Sometimes they're right. Sometimes they miss what's actually happening." Santos nodded slowly. "And what's actually happening here?" Elena's eyes held steady contact with him. "I'm learning to do a job that needs doing, same as everyone else." The afternoon brought live fire exercises. The M777 howitzer stood like a mechanical predator, its barrel pointed toward the distant target range. The process of loading and firing required coordination between multiple crew members, each with specific responsibilities that had to be executed with split-second timing. Elena was assigned to the ammunition team alongside Morrison and Chen. Their job was to maintain the supply of shells to the gun crew, ensuring that when the fire control officer called for rounds, the cannon could maintain its rate of fire without interruption. The first fire mission came at 13:47 hours. "Fire mission, grid 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, high explosive, charge 7, 1 round." The call sent the crew into immediate action. Elena grabbed the first shell, her movements sharp and economical. As she approached the breech of the howitzer, she noticed something the others had missed. The shell's fuse was set incorrectly for the mission parameters. "Hold!" Elena called out, her voice cutting through the organized chaos. "Fuse setting is wrong." Sergeant Santos spun toward her, his face initially showing irritation at the interruption. But as he checked the shell Elena held, his expression shifted. The fuse was indeed set for proximity burst instead of the point detonation required for the mission. "Good catch, Hartwell." Santos's voice carried genuine respect. "Reset and continue." Elena quickly adjusted the fuse setting with the precision tool, her movements faster and more confident than anyone expected. She delivered the shell to the gun crew, who loaded and fired in one smooth sequence. The distant explosion confirmed a successful impact on the target. The exercise continued for 2 hours. Mission after mission tested the crew's ability to maintain accurate, sustained fire. Elena's role evolved naturally. Her eye for detail caught equipment issues before they became problems. Her efficient movement kept the ammunition flowing smoothly. And her stamina outlasted soldiers who had started the day questioning her presence. By 1600 hours, the official exercise had concluded. But Captain Webb had one more test in mind. He approached Elena as she helped police the firing line, collecting brass casings and securing unused ammunition. "Hartwell." Webb's voice carried the tone of an officer about to make a decision that would affect careers. "I want to see something. Think you can handle a speed drill?" Elena straightened to attention. "What kind of speed drill, sir?"
Webb gestured toward a fresh pallet of shells positioned 30 meters from the howitzer. Sustained fire simulation. We'll time how many rounds you can move and properly position in 5 minutes. Standard is 12 rounds. Most soldiers manage 8 to 10. The other members of Battery C gathered around, sensing that something significant was about to happen. The betting pool from the morning had evolved throughout the day, with odds shifting as Elena's competence became undeniable. Elena approached the pallet with the same careful assessment she'd applied all day. But now something had changed in her demeanor. The morning's caution had been replaced by confidence earned through performance. She had proven to herself and others that she belonged here. "Ready when you are, sir," Elena announced. Captain Webb raised his stopwatch. "Begin." What happened next would become legend within the 2nd Artillery Battalion. Elena moved with a rhythm that seemed almost mechanical in its precision. Her technique, refined through hours of practice and observation, eliminated wasted motion. She lifted each 43-pound shell with movements that flowed into each other, carrying them to the firing position with speed that defied her physical dimensions.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The gathered soldiers counted along. 8, 9, 10. Elena's breathing remained controlled, her form perfect. The shells moved from pallet to firing position as if connected by an invisible conveyor belt. 13, 14, 15. At 15 rounds, Elena had surpassed not just the standard, but the best performance anyone at Fort Braxton had recorded. But she wasn't slowing down. 18, 19, 20. Captain Webb's stopwatch showed 4 minutes and 30 seconds elapsed. Elena placed the 20th shell in perfect position and turned back toward the pallet for another. Time! Webb stared at his stopwatch, then at Elena, then back at his watch. 21 shells in 5 minutes. The previous base record had been 17, set by a soldier who outweighed Elena by 80 pounds. Elena stood at attention, barely winded, waiting for Webb's assessment. Around her, Battery C had fallen silent, except for the distant sound of other units conducting their own training. Sergeant Santos was the first to speak. "I'll be damned." Word of Elena's record-breaking performance spread through Fort Braxton like wildfire. By evening chow, soldiers from other battalions were stopping by the 2nd Artillery's area, wanting to see the woman who'd moved 21 shells in 5 minutes. Elena found herself uncomfortable with the attention, preferring to focus on mastering the technical aspects of artillery operations that extended far beyond physical shell handling. The next morning brought advanced fire control training. Elena reported to the classroom trailer where Warrant Officer Patricia Valdez, the battalion's senior fire direction specialist, conducted instruction on the digital fire control systems that turned raw targeting data into precise artillery strikes. Valdez, a 15-year veteran from New Mexico, had earned her reputation by calculating firing solutions faster than the computer systems designed to assist her. "Artillery isn't just about moving heavy objects," Valdez began, her laser pointer highlighting complex mathematical formulas on the projection screen. "Every round we fire follows ballistic principles that account for wind speed, air density, earth rotation, target movement, and weapon characteristics. Miss any variable, and your round lands on friendlies instead of enemies." Elena absorbed every detail. The M777's digital fire control system could calculate basic firing solutions, but experienced artillery specialists learned to verify and adjust those calculations based on real-world conditions that computers couldn't always anticipate. Atmospheric pressure changes, powder temperature variations, and barrel wear all affected projectile trajectory in ways that required human expertise to compensate. Private First Class Danny Foster from Alabama, who'd scored highest on the written artillery exams, struggled with the practical application of ballistic calculations under time pressure. When Valdez called out a fire mission scenario, enemy position at grid reference 12345678, range 8,400 meters, adjust for 15-knot crosswind, Foster's calculations took 4 minutes and contained an error that would have placed the round 200 meters off target. Elena's turn came next.
She approached the fire control computer with the same methodical precision she'd applied to shell handling. But instead of simply inputting the basic parameters, she began incorporating additional variables she'd studied the night before. "Enemy position confirmed," Elena announced, her fingers moving efficiently across the keyboard. "Accounting for current barometric pressure, powder temperature at 78 degrees, barrel wear factor based on round count." She paused, cross-referencing her digital calculations with manual computations scribbled on scratch paper. "Adjusted firing solution, elevation 1,247 mils, deflection left 23 mils. Time of flight 41.2 seconds. Valdez checked Elena's solution against her own calculations. Perfect accuracy, completed in 93 seconds. "Where did you learn to factor barrel wear into field calculations?" Valdez asked, genuinely curious. Elena looked up from the fire control system. "The technical manual, ma'am, Chapter 7, Subsection 4. It mentioned that high round counts degrade accuracy, so I researched how to compensate." Valdez nodded approvingly. "Most soldiers don't bother with those calculations until they're E6 or higher. You're thinking like a specialist, not just following procedures." The training intensified over the following days. Elena excelled in every aspect, from advanced shell handling techniques to complex fire mission coordination. But her real breakthrough came during night operations training. Staff Sergeant Angela Torres, a night vision warfare expert from Arizona, led the exercise. Torres had completed 4 combat deployments where artillery operations often occurred in complete darkness, relying on thermal imaging, night vision equipment, and careful sound discipline to avoid revealing positions to enemy forces. "Darkness changes everything," Torres explained, as Battery C prepared for the overnight exercise. "You can't see shell markings clearly, equipment looks different through night vision, everything takes longer, and mistakes become deadly."
The exercise scenario placed the artillery unit in simulated combat conditions. Enemy forces were advancing on their position, and friendly infantry units needed immediate fire support to avoid being overrun. The catch? All operations had to be conducted under blackout conditions, with only minimal red light illumination permitted. Elena volunteered for the most challenging position, ammunition handler for the primary howitzer crew. This role required identifying different shell types by touch, ensuring proper fuse settings in near-total darkness, and maintaining the rapid pace of loading that combat situations demanded. At 2,000 hours, the first fire mission came through the radio. "Steel Rain 6, this is Groundhog 27. Troops in contact. Need immediate suppression. Grid 87654321. Danger close, friendlies within 200 meters." Elena moved through the darkness with confidence that surprised even herself. Her hands had memorized the shape and weight of every shell type during daylight training. High explosive rounds felt different from illumination shells. Smoke rounds had distinctive markings she could identify through her gloves. White phosphorus shells carried warning labels with raised lettering that her fingertips could read like Braille. The first shell loaded perfectly. Elena had identified it as high explosive, verified the fuse setting by touch, and delivered it to the gun crew in 48 seconds, faster than most soldiers could manage in daylight. "Steel Rain 6, round complete, on target." The forward observer's confirmation crackled through the radio. "Repeat, same target." Elena was already moving with the second shell, but as she lifted it, her trained fingers detected something wrong. The shell's weight distribution felt off, slightly nose-heavy in a way that indicated internal shifting of the explosive compound. In combat, such a shell could cause a premature detonation that would kill the entire gun crew. "Hold fire," Elena called out, her voice carrying clearly through the darkness. "Defective round." Sergeant Santos appeared beside her with a red-filtered flashlight. His inspection confirmed Elena's assessment. The shell showed hairline cracks near the fuse well that made it unsafe for firing. "How did you catch that in the dark?" Santos asked, genuinely amazed. Elena was already selecting a replacement shell from the ammunition supply. It felt wrong. Weight distribution was off by maybe half a pound. The fire mission continued without interruption. Elena's ability to identify shell defects by touch, combined with her speed and accuracy, kept the howitzer firing at maximum sustainable rate. By dawn, Battery C had successfully completed 12 separate fire missions, expending over 200 rounds with 0 malfunctions or misfires. Captain Webb conducted the after-action review as the sun rose over Fort Braxton. His assessment would determine Elena's permanent assignment within the battalion and her potential for advanced artillery training. Last night's exercise demonstrated combat-level proficiency across all positions, Webb announced to the assembled soldiers. But one performance stood out. Private Hartwell identified a potentially catastrophic shell defect under blackout conditions, maintained perfect ammunition flow during sustained fire, and achieved accuracy standards that exceed many senior specialists. Elena stood at attention with the rest of Battery C, but she could feel the weight of Webb's words settling on her shoulders like a mantle of responsibility. Effective immediately, Webb continued, Private Hartwell is promoted to Private First Class and assigned as Primary Ammunition Specialist for Gun 1. She'll also begin training for Fire Direction Specialist certification. The promotion came with increased responsibility and respect from her peers. Specialist Morrison, who had initially doubted Elena's capabilities, approached her after the formation was dismissed. PFC Hartwell, Morrison's tone carried genuine respect. I owe you an apology. I made assumptions based on appearances instead of performance. Elena accepted his handshake. We all make assumptions, Morrison. What matters is what we do when we learn better. Sergeant First Class Santos pulled Elena aside as the unit prepared for the day's training. His weathered face showed an expression she hadn't seen before, something approaching paternal pride. Hartwell, I've been in artillery for 15 years. I've seen strong soldiers, smart soldiers, dedicated soldiers. But I've never seen someone with your combination of physical capability, technical knowledge, and situational awareness. Santos paused, choosing his words carefully. There's talk about sending someone from our battalion to the Advanced Artillery Leadership course at Fort Sill. It's competitive. Only the top 1% qualify. Elena felt her pulse quicken. Fort Sill, Oklahoma housed the U.S. Army Field Artillery School, where the military's most elite artillery specialists receive training that would prepare them for leadership positions in combat units worldwide. What would I need to do to qualify, Sergeant?
Santos smiled. Keep doing exactly what you're doing. But understand, if you go to Fort Sill, you'll be competing against the best artillery soldiers in the Army. Many of them will question whether you belong there, just like they did here. Elena's expression hardened with determination. Then I'll have to prove them wrong, just like I did here. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent announcement over the battalion's public address system. All personnel of Battery C report to the motor pool immediately. Emergency deployment exercise commences in 30 minutes. Elena grabbed her gear and joined the rush toward the vehicles. Whatever came next, she was ready. The emergency deployment exercise turned out to be more than routine training. As Battery C loaded their equipment onto heavy transport trucks, Major Lisa Coleman, the battalion executive officer, briefed the unit leaders on the scenario that would test everything Elena had learned. Gentlemen and ladies, Coleman's voice carried the authority of someone who'd commanded artillery units in 3 combat zones. This exercise simulates rapid deployment to support the 82nd Airborne Division during a crisis response mission. You have 4 hours to displace, move 15 miles, establish firing positions, and conduct live fire support for airborne operations. Elena secured ammunition in the transport vehicle while absorbing the tactical situation. The 82nd Airborne would be conducting a nighttime parachute assault on a simulated enemy airfield. Battery C's mission was to provide immediate fire support once the paratroopers hit the ground, suppressing enemy positions that threatened the landing zones. The convoy departed Fort Braxton at 1200 hours. Destination Grid Square, November 7, a remote section of the training area where the artillery would establish a forward operating base. Elena rode in the ammunition truck with Corporal Chen and 2 newer privates, Jennifer Walsh from Oregon and Marcus Thompson from Georgia, both fresh from artillery school and eager to prove themselves in their first major exercise. PFC Hartwell, Walsh spoke up as the convoy navigated rural North Carolina backroads. Is it true you set a record for shell handling speed? Elena continued checking ammunition inventory sheets. Records don't matter in combat, Walsh. What matters is getting rounds on target when people's lives depend on it. Thompson leaned forward from his position across the truck bed. But the speed helps, right? I mean, faster loading means more fire support. Elena looked up from her paperwork. Speed without accuracy is useless. Accuracy without speed gets people killed. The job is finding the balance that keeps your crew alive and supports the mission. The convoy reached Grid Square November 7 at 1530 hours. The location was a cleared field surrounded by dense pine forests, chosen for its concealment and proximity to the simulated combat zone. Elena had never participated in establishing a forward operating base from scratch, but she applied the same methodical approach that had served her throughout training. Master Sergeant Raymond Price, Battery C's senior enlisted leader, coordinated the base establishment. Price, a career artillery soldier from Louisiana with 23 years of service, had overseen deployments in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Eastern Europe. His experience showed in the efficient way he organized the complex process of transforming an empty field into a functional artillery position. Hartwell, Price called out as Elena supervised ammunition placement, "You're with Gun 1 crew for this exercise, but I want you cross-trained on the Fire Direction Center operations as well. Valdez specifically requested you." Elena felt a surge of professional pride. The Fire Direction Center, or FDC, was the nerve center of artillery operations. FDC specialists calculated firing solutions, coordinated with forward observers, and managed the complex mathematics that transformed target coordinates into accurate artillery strikes. Working in the FDC required mastery of ballistics, meteorology, and tactical communications that went far beyond physical shell handling. Warrant Officer Valdez greeted Elena at the FDC trailer, a modified tactical vehicle packed with computers, radios, and plotting boards. "PFC Hartwell, glad to have you here. Tonight's exercise will test every skill you've developed. The airborne assault begins at 2100 hours, and we'll be providing continuous fire support throughout the night." Elena studied the tactical display showing the exercise area. The simulated enemy airfield was 8 kilometers away, well within the M77's maximum range, but requiring precise calculations to avoid hitting friendly aircraft during the assault phase. "The challenge," Valdez continued, "is that paratroopers will be scattered across multiple drop zones. Enemy positions are mixed in with civilian structures we can't damage. Every fire mission requires split-second decisions about target priority, ammunition selection, and danger close procedures." At 1800 hours, the first communications check came from the airborne forward observers. Call signs Red Hawk, Falcon, and Eagle reported their aircraft departing from Pope Army Airfield, carrying 200 paratroopers who would depend on Battery C's fire support for survival during the most vulnerable moments of their assault. Elena divided her attention between monitoring the FDC radio traffic and ensuring Gun 1's ammunition was properly sorted and readily accessible. The exercise would require rapid transitions between different shell types: high explosive for bunkers, illumination for night visibility, smoke for concealment, and possibly white phosphorus for marking targets.
Steel Rain 6. This is Red Hawk 1-6. The radio crackled at 2047 hours. Aircraft inbound, 20 miles to the drop zone. Request immediate suppression of known enemy positions, coordinates to follow. Valdez turned to Elena. "Your turn. Take the fire mission." Elena's vans moved to the fire control computer with practiced confidence. The coordinates came through clearly. Grid 12345678. Suspected machine gun position threatening drop zone Alpha. Range 7,200 meters. Mission type suppression. Shot data computed, Elena announced after 37 seconds of rapid calculation. Grid 12345678. High explosive, fuse quick, charge 5. Elevation 084 mils, deflection right 0032. Time of flight is 31 seconds. Steel Rain 6, shot over. The radio operator transmitted Elena's firing solution to Gun 1. Shot out, came the immediate response as the howitzer fired. Elena started her stopwatch, counting down the time of flight. At 31 seconds exactly, the radio confirmed. Red Hawk 1-6, Steel Rain 6, splash over. Steel Rain 6, target suppressed, good effect. Paratroopers away. The exercise intensified rapidly. Multiple aircraft dropped paratroopers across 3 separate zones, while Elena coordinated fire missions that eliminated simulated enemy positions threatening the assault. Her calculations had to account for friendly aircraft flight paths, paratrooper drift patterns, and the complex geometry of supporting scattered ground forces simultaneously. At 21:34 hours, the most challenging fire mission of the night arrived. Steel Rain 6, this is Eagle 2-2. Troops in contact. Enemy armored vehicles moving toward Drop Zone Charlie. Immediate suppression required, danger close, friendlies within 150 meters. Elena's training kicked in automatically. Danger close fire missions required absolute precision. The margin for error was measured in meters, not hundreds of meters. One miscalculation would result in friendly casualties that would haunt everyone involved for the rest of their careers. Confirm danger close. Elena transmitted back. Friendlies 150 meters from target. Affirmative, Steel Rain 6. Enemy armor advancing on our position. We need fire now. Elena recalculated the firing solution 3 times, accounting for every possible variable. Wind speed, air temperature, powder temperature, barrel wear, even the slight elevation difference between gun position and target area. Her final solution placed the impact point exactly 152 meters from the reported friendly positions. Shot data confirmed danger close, announced Elena. High explosive, fuse delay 0.05 seconds for ground penetration. Elevation 0923 mils. Deflection left 0018. Gun 1 fired immediately. Elena held her breath during the time of flight, knowing that lives depended on her mathematics being perfect. Steel Rain 6, Eagle 2-2. The radio crackled after what felt like an eternity. Direct hit on enemy armor. Threat neutralized. No friendly casualties. Outstanding shooting. The exercise continued until 0300 hours. Battery C fired 68 rounds in support of the airborne assault, with Elena calculating firing solutions for 32 separate missions. Every round landed within acceptable accuracy standards. 0 misfires, 0 safety violations, 0 friendly fire incidents. Major Coleman conducted the after-action review at dawn. Her assessment would determine which soldiers were recommended for advanced training and leadership positions. Last night's exercise demonstrated exceptional professional competence across all positions, Coleman announced to Battery C. But the Fire Direction Center performance deserves special recognition. PFC Hartwell calculated complex firing solutions faster than many warrant officers, maintained perfect accuracy during danger close missions, and demonstrated tactical awareness that prevented potential friendly fire incidents. Elena stood at attention, feeling the weight of professional achievement settling around her like armor. PFC Hartwell, Coleman continued, you're hereby recommended for the Advanced Artillery Leadership Course at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Report to battalion headquarters at 0800 hours tomorrow for administrative processing. As the formation was dismissed, Elena felt a mixture of pride and trepidation. Fort Sill would test her against the Army's best artillery specialists, many of whom would arrive with years more experience and institutional advantages she'd never enjoyed. Sergeant First Class Santos approached as Elena collected her gear. Hartwell, you ready for what comes next? Elena shouldered her pack and looked toward the horizon where the morning sun was burning away the last traces of night. I've been ready my whole life, Sergeant. I just didn't know what I was getting ready for. Fort Sill will be different, Santos warned. Politics, competition, old boy networks. Some people there won't want you to succeed. Elena's expression hardened with the determination that had carried her from a Montana ranch to the top of her artillery class. "Then they'll learn the same lesson everyone else has learned, Sergeant. They'll learn not to underestimate what they don't understand." Fort Sill, Oklahoma, stretched across 94,000 acres of prairie landscape where the U.S. Army had trained artillery specialists since 1869. Elena arrived on a Tuesday morning in September, her duffel bag containing everything she owned and her mind focused on the challenge ahead. The Advanced Artillery Leadership course accepted only 48 students per cycle, drawn from artillery units across the globe. Elena was the youngest candidate and one of only 3 women in her class. The in-processing station buzzed with activity as soldiers from different backgrounds checked in for the intensive 12-week program. Elena noticed immediately that most of her classmates carried themselves with the confidence of proven leaders. Staff Sergeant Michael Barnes from the 1st Armored Division had commanded gun sections in Syria. Sergeant First Class Lisa Rodriguez from the 173rd Airborne Brigade had coordinated fire support during jungle warfare training in the Philippines. Technical Sergeant James McKinley from the Air Force had directed close air support missions that required coordination between aircraft and ground artillery. Elena's sponsor, Sergeant Major William Jackson, was a 30-year artillery veteran whose weathered hands bore scars from decades of handling high explosives. Jackson had specifically requested Elena's assignment to his student platoon after reviewing her Fort Braxton performance evaluations. PFC Hartwell. Jackson's gravelly voice carried the authority of someone who'd survived combat deployments on 4 continents. Welcome to Fort Sill. This course will challenge everything you think you know about artillery. Physical capability got you here, but mental toughness will determine whether you graduate. Elena's quarters were in Building 582, a modern barracks that housed the advanced course students. Her roommate was Staff Sergeant Nicole Patterson from the National Guard's 142nd Field Artillery, a college graduate from Minnesota who joined the Guard to pay for law school but discovered a passion for military leadership that changed her career plans entirely. "So, you're the record holder from North Carolina," Patterson said as Elena arranged her footlocker with military precision. "Word travels fast in the artillery community. They're saying you handled shells faster than anyone in battalion history." Elena continued organizing her equipment without looking up. Records are history. What matters is what happens next. Patterson studied Elena with the analytical gaze of someone accustomed to evaluating people quickly. "You know there's betting going on about whether you'll make it through the course." Elena's hands paused momentarily before resuming their work. "What kind of betting?" "Some instructors think you're too young and inexperienced for advanced material. Others think you'll wash out when the academic pressure gets intense." Patterson's tone was matter-of-fact, not malicious. "Then there's a third group that thinks you might surprise everyone." Elena finally looked up, meeting Patterson's gaze directly. "Which group are you in?" Patterson smiled. "I'm withholding judgment until I see what you can do, but I'm hoping for a surprise." The first week of instruction covered advanced ballistics theory under the direction of Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a civilian contractor with a PhD in applied physics from MIT. Dr. Mitchell had spent 15 years developing computer models that predicted artillery accuracy under conditions that traditional ballistics tables couldn't account for. "Gentlemen and ladies," Dr. Mitchell began her first lecture, "you've mastered basic artillery mathematics. Now we're going to explore the variables that separate competent artillery from exceptional artillery. Coriolis effect, atmospheric layering, projectile yaw, and real-time meteorological integration." Elena discovered that the advanced course demanded mathematical sophistication far beyond anything she'd encountered at Fort Braxton. The calculations involved differential equations, statistical analysis, and computer programming concepts that challenged even students with college engineering backgrounds. Staff Sergeant Barnes, who held a degree in mechanical engineering from Virginia Tech, struggled with the programming assignments that required students to write software code for calculating firing solutions.
Elena, who'd taught herself computer programming during slow periods at Fort Braxton, found herself helping classmates debug their code during evening study sessions. "How did you learn this stuff?" Barnes asked one night as Elena corrected an error in his ballistics calculation program. "Most of us are struggling just to understand the basic concepts." Elena continued typing, her fingers moving efficiently across the keyboard. "I read the technical manuals for every system we use, not just the operator procedures, the engineering specifications, maintenance manuals, design theory. When you understand how something works at the fundamental level, advanced applications make more sense." The academic challenges intensified during Week 3 with Introduction to Joint Operations, taught by Colonel Rebecca Hayes, a field artillery officer who'd coordinated fire support between Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine units during recent operations in Eastern Europe. "Modern artillery doesn't operate in isolation," Colonel Hayes explained while displaying complex battlefield graphics. "You'll coordinate with naval gunfire, close air support, rocket artillery, and electronic warfare systems. Each platform has different capabilities, limitations, and coordination requirements."
Elena absorbed the material with characteristic intensity, but she also noticed something troubling. During tactical exercises, some instructors seemed to assign her to subordinate roles that didn't fully utilize her demonstrated capabilities. When teams were formed for leadership rotations, she was often placed as assistant rather than primary leader, despite her superior technical knowledge. The pattern became obvious during Week 5's culminating exercise, Joint Fire Support Coordination. Students were divided into teams that would plan and execute complex fire missions involving multiple weapon systems. Elena expected to be assigned as fire direction officer based on her exceptional computational skills, but instead found herself relegated to assistant ammunition coordinator. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, who'd been assigned as Elena's team leader, pulled her aside after the team assignments were announced. "Hartwell, I reviewed your performance scores. You should be running this exercise, not supporting it." Elena maintained military bearing despite her frustration. "I serve where I'm assigned, Sergeant." Rodriguez's expression hardened. "That's professional, but it's also naive. Some people here don't want to see you succeed. They're hoping you'll get discouraged and request transfer back to a regular unit." Elena studied Rodriguez's face, recognizing the expression of someone who'd faced similar challenges. "Has this happened before?" "I was the first Latina to complete the advanced course," Rodriguez replied quietly. "They tried the same tactics on me. Subtle assignment to lesser roles, exclusion from informal leadership opportunities, assumptions about technical capability based on appearance rather than performance." Elena felt something crystallize inside her chest, not anger, but determination refined into something harder and more focused. "What did you do?" Rodriguez smiled grimly. "I documented everything, kept detailed records of assignments, performance evaluations, and outcomes. Then I outperformed everyone so decisively that they couldn't ignore my capabilities without looking obviously biased." That evening, Elena began maintaining a detailed logbook of her Fort Sill experience. Test scores, assignment patterns, instructor feedback, and peer evaluations went into a notebook that she secured in her footlocker each night. But more importantly, she intensified her preparation for the upcoming exercises. Week 6 brought urban operations, the most challenging tactical scenario in the advanced course. Students had to coordinate artillery support for infantry operations in simulated city environments where civilian casualties were unacceptable and precision was paramount. Elena's team was assigned a particularly difficult scenario, supporting special operations forces during a hostage rescue mission in a dense urban environment. The mission required artillery to neutralize enemy positions within 50 meters of buildings containing civilians while avoiding damage to critical infrastructure. As assistant ammunition coordinator, Elena was theoretically responsible only for ensuring adequate shell supplies. But during the mission planning phase, she noticed that the primary fire direction officer had made calculation errors that would result in rounds landing dangerously close to civilian structures. Elena faced a choice:
Remain in her assigned subordinate role and allow potentially catastrophic errors to proceed, or exceed her authority by correcting mistakes that weren't technically her responsibility. She chose action over safety. Staff Sergeant Thompson, Elena addressed the fire direction officer during a planning meeting attended by instructors. I believe there's an error in the danger area calculations for Mission Bravo 7. Thompson, a seasoned NCO from the 82nd Airborne Division, looked irritated at being questioned by someone in a supporting role. PFC Hartwell, ammunition coordination is your responsibility. The fire direction is mine. Elena maintained respectful military bearing while pressing forward. Roger, Staff Sergeant, but the safety template for Mission Bravo 7 shows potential civilian casualties if wind conditions change during execution. Colonel Hayes, who'd been observing the planning session, stepped forward. Explain your concern, PFC Hartwell. Elena moved to the tactical display, pointing to specific coordinates on the urban map. The current firing solution assumes standard atmospheric conditions, but the meteorological forecast shows potential wind shear at 2,000 feet during the execution window. If wind speed increases to 15 knots from the northwest, the projectile trajectory shifts approximately 40 meters directly over the school building here. Thompson checked Elena's calculations on his computer, his expression shifting from irritation to concern as he verified her analysis. She's right. I missed the wind shear factor. Colonel Hayes studied Elena with new attention. What's your recommended solution, PFC Hartwell? Elena had prepared for this moment. Adjust the firing position 30 meters east to account for maximum wind deviation, reduce charge by 1 increment to steepen trajectory angle, and employ time delay fuses to ensure ground penetration before detonation.
The room fell silent as Thompson and the other team leaders verified Elena's proposed solution. Her corrections not only eliminated the civilian casualty risk, but actually improved the overall mission effectiveness. Colonel Hayes made notes on her evaluation clipboard. PFC Hartwell, effective immediately, you're reassigned as primary fire direction officer for this exercise. Staff Sergeant Thompson, you'll coordinate ammunition supply. Elena felt the weight of opportunity and responsibility settling on her shoulders. This was her chance to prove that technical excellence could overcome institutional bias, but only if her performance was absolutely flawless. The urban operations exercise commenced at 060 hours the following morning. Elena's fire direction calculations would determine the success or failure of simulated special operations missions that depended on precision artillery support in the most challenging environment possible. The urban operations exercise transformed Fort Sill's training area into a simulated Middle Eastern city, complete with multi-story buildings, narrow streets, and mock civilian populations. Elena established her fire direction center in a concrete bunker designed to replicate the communication challenges of real urban warfare, where radio signals bounced unpredictably off buildings and electronic interference could disrupt digital systems at critical moments. Elena's team consisted of Specialist David Park, a Korean-American soldier from Hawaii with exceptional communication skills, and Corporal Jennifer Martinez from Texas, whose background in computer science made her invaluable for troubleshooting the digital fire control systems. Both had volunteered to work under Elena's direction after witnessing her technical demonstration during the planning phase. "Ma'am," Park reported as he tested the radio equipment, "we've got intermittent signal degradation on the primary frequency. The building materials in the training area are causing more interference than expected." Elena studied the communication plan she'd developed, switched to the backup frequency for initial contact, then established relay stations on buildings Alpha and Charlie. "Martinez, can you configure the digital systems to compensate for the signal delays?" Martinez's fingers flew across the computer keyboard. "Already working on it. I'm writing a subroutine that will automatically adjust for transmission lag and atmospheric scatter." The first simulated special operations team, call sign Razor 17, established contact at 0630 hours. Their mission was to rescue hostages held in Building Delta while neutralizing enemy forces positioned throughout the urban complex. Elena's artillery support had to eliminate specific threats without damaging structures that contained civilians or compromising the rescue operation. Steel Rain Base, this is Razor 17. The radio crackled with realistic static designed to simulate urban communication challenges. Moving to Phase Line Bravo, request suppression of enemy position in Building Charlie, 3rd floor, northwest corner. Hostiles have crew-served weapons covering our approach route. Elena immediately began calculating the firing solution. The target was a simulated machine gun position 4,200 meters away, located in a concrete building with known civilian populations on adjacent floors. The margin for error was measured in meters. Razor 17, Steel Rain Base copies. Confirm civilians on floors 2 and 4 of Building Charlie? Affirmative, Steel Rain Base. Civilian patterns show approximately 20 non-combatants. Precision fire required. Elena's calculations incorporated every variable she'd mastered during 8 weeks at Fort Sill. Building materials, trajectory angles that would prevent overpenetration, fuse timing that would ensure detonation occurred exactly at the target floor without structural collapse that could harm civilians above or below. Shot data computed, Elena announced to her team. Grid 45678321, Building Charlie, 3rd floor. High explosive, fuse delay 0.15 seconds, charge 3. Elevation 0234 mils, deflection left 0056. The simulated artillery fire was represented by laser designators that marked precise impact points on the training buildings. Sensors throughout the complex measured accuracy within centimeters, providing immediate feedback on whether Elena's calculations would have achieved the desired effect. Steel Rain Base, Razor 17. Target neutralized, no collateral damage detected. Outstanding precision. The exercise continued for 6 hours, with Elena's team supporting multiple simultaneous operations. Hostage rescue missions demanded surgical precision, while counter-sniper operations required rapid engagement of fleeting targets. Each fire mission tested different aspects of Elena's technical expertise and tactical judgment. At 10:45 hours, the most challenging scenario began. Intelligence reports indicated that enemy forces had taken control of a hospital containing 200 civilians. Special operations teams needed to assault the building, while artillery suppressed enemy positions on the roof and in adjacent structures. The catch, several enemy positions were located within 25 meters of medical equipment that could not be damaged without causing massive civilian casualties. Steel Rain Base, this is Viper 2-2. We need immediate suppression of rooftop positions, but the hospital's oxygen storage facility is directly adjacent to enemy Strongpoint Alpha. Any damage to those tanks will create secondary explosions that will kill everyone in the building.
Elena stared at the tactical display, mentally calculating angles and blast effects. Standard artillery techniques were useless in this scenario. She needed to develop an entirely new approach that could neutralize the target while preventing secondary damage. Viper 2-2, Steel Rain Base. I'm computing a non-standard solution. Stand by. Elena turned to Martinez. Can you access the building schematics in the database? I need structural load information for the hospital roof. Coming up now, Martinez replied, her screen filled with architectural drawings. Elena studied the building plans with the intensity of an engineer designing a bridge. Her solution required understanding not just ballistics, but structural engineering, blast physics, and the precise placement of explosive force to achieve tactical effects without unacceptable consequences. Here's what we're going to do, Elena announced to her team. Instead of direct fire on the rooftop position, we'll use airburst rounds detonated 15 meters above the building. The blast wave will neutralize personnel on the roof without generating fragments that could damage the oxygen facility. Park looked skeptical. Ma'am, air burst over buildings is incredibly difficult to calculate. Wind shear, thermal updrafts from the building, barometric pressure variations. Any miscalculation puts the burst either too low, which creates fragments, or too high, which provides insufficient suppression. Elena was already working through mathematics. That's why we're going to fire a bracketing sequence. First round, air burst at 17 meters to establish baseline, then adjust to optimal height based on observed effects. The technique Elena proposed was so advanced that it wasn't taught until the senior artillery officer course, normally attended by majors and lieutenant colonels with years of operational experience. But the tactical situation demanded innovation beyond conventional doctrine. Shot data computed, Elena announced after 10 minutes of intensive calculation. Grid 876-54321, hospital rooftop. High explosive, fuse time 2.7 seconds, charge 4. Elevation 0445 mils, deflection right 0023. The laser designator marked the precise point where Elena's round would have detonated. 15 meters above the hospital roof, exactly as calculated. The computer simulation showed successful suppression of enemy positions with zero damage to critical infrastructure. Steel rain base, Viper 2-2, perfect suppression. Enemy rooftop positions neutralized, hospital oxygen facility intact. How did you calculate that solution? Elena keyed her radio with professional satisfaction. Airburst mathematics, Viper 2-2, adjusted for urban thermal effects and building-induced wind shear. Colonel Hayes, who'd been monitoring the exercise from the observation center, appeared at Elena's fire direction center as the scenario concluded. Her expression was unreadable, but she carried a clipboard filled with evaluation notes. PFC Hartwell, Hayes said quietly. In 15 years of instruction at Fort Sill, I've never seen a student successfully employ airburst fire in an urban environment. That technique is considered too advanced for company-grade officers. Elena stood at attention. Ma'am, the tactical situation required adaptive solutions beyond standard doctrine. Hayes studied Elena for a long moment. Where did you learn airburst calculations? I studied the advanced gunnery manuals during off-duty time, ma'am. The mathematical principles are extensions of standard ballistics, adjusted for three-dimensional burst effects. Hayes made additional notes on her evaluation form. PFC Hartwell, your performance during this exercise exceeded the standards for graduates of the Senior Artillery Officer course. You've demonstrated technical competence, tactical innovation, and leadership under pressure that places you in the top 1% of students I've evaluated. Elena felt a surge of professional pride, but Hayes wasn't finished. However, Hayes continued, exceptional technical ability alone doesn't guarantee success in advanced military positions. The final exercise will test your ability to function as part of the institutional army, not just as an individual performer. Elena's satisfaction was tempered by the implication in Hayes's words. Technical excellence had brought her this far, but the final challenge would involve navigating military politics and institutional dynamics that could prove more dangerous than any ballistics calculation. Ma'am, what does the final exercise involve? Hayes smiled with the expression of someone about to reveal a particularly challenging puzzle. Multinational Joint Operations, PFC Hartwell. You'll coordinate artillery support for a simulated NATO exercise involving American, British, Canadian, and German forces. Different equipment, different procedures, different languages, and different cultural approaches to military leadership. Elena realized that her greatest test wasn't technical, it was diplomatic. The international exercise transformed Fort Sill into a miniature United Nations as military personnel from 4 different countries established their command centers across the
area. Elena reported to the Joint Fire Support Coordination Center at 0500 hours, where she would spend the next 72 hours working alongside artillery specialists whose approaches to warfare had been shaped by entirely different military traditions. Captain James Whitmore of the British Royal Artillery arrived with the precision of someone trained at Sandhurst, his accent carrying the authority of generations of military tradition. Major Klaus Weber from the German Bundeswehr brought systematic efficiency that reflected his engineering background and experience with NATO standardization protocols. Captain Marie Dubois from the Canadian Artillery had commanded mixed-gender units for 5 years and possessed practical experience integrating diverse personnel into effective fighting forces. Elena was assigned as the American representative to the Multinational Fire Coordination Team, a role that placed her in direct contact with senior officers who outranked her by several pay grades. Her mission was to coordinate American M777 howitzer fire with British L118 light guns, German PZH-2000 self-propelled artillery, and Canadian M777A2 systems during simulated combat operations against a sophisticated enemy force. The challenge of multinational operations, explained Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Anderson, the American Exercise Director, isn't just technical coordination, it's cultural integration, communication across language barriers, and diplomatic sensitivity to different national approaches to military decision-making. Elena immediately recognized that her technical expertise, while necessary, wouldn't be sufficient for success in this environment. She needed to understand how different armies approached problems, communicated priorities, and made decisions under pressure. Captain Whitmore opened the first planning session with characteristic British directness. Right then, the scenario involves coordinated fire support for a mechanized infantry assault across 12 kilometers of defended terrain. German Leopard tanks will lead the advance, supported by British Warrior infantry fighting vehicles, Canadian LAV-25s, and American Bradley fighting vehicles. Major Weber spread detailed tactical maps across the planning table. Our artillery must suppress 17 confirmed enemy positions while avoiding 43 civilian structures and 3 refugee camps. The enemy has counter-battery radar, so we must coordinate simultaneous fire from all 4 national artillery units to minimize exposure time. Elena studied the tactical situation with growing appreciation for its complexity. Each country's artillery operated on different radio frequencies, used different targeting procedures, and employed different ammunition types with varying ballistic characteristics. Coordinating their fire would require mathematical precision that accounted for these variations while maintaining tactical effectiveness. Captain Dubois addressed the elephant in the room. This exercise will test our ability to integrate command structures with different approaches to rank, gender roles, and decision-making authority. Some of our forces come from military cultures with different traditions regarding junior personnel input into tactical planning. Elena understood the subtle message. As the youngest and lowest-ranking member of the coordination team, she would need to contribute meaningfully while navigating international diplomatic sensitivities that could affect relationships between allied nations. The planning session continued for 8 hours. Elena contributed technical calculations that harmonized the different artillery systems' capabilities, but she also observed the cultural dynamics that influenced how decisions were made. Captain Whitmore preferred detailed advance planning with minimal real-time adjustments. Major Weber emphasized systematic procedures that could be replicated consistently. Captain Dubois focused on adaptive leadership that could respond to changing battlefield conditions. Elena's opportunity to demonstrate leadership came during the second day when the simulated enemy forces launched a counterattack that disrupted the original fire support plan. Multiple friendly units were engaged simultaneously across the battlefield, requiring immediate artillery support that hadn't been pre-planned. Contacts, multiple armored vehicles approaching Grid Square 1234. British infantry in contact, requesting immediate suppression. The radio traffic exploded with urgent requests from various national units, each using their own communication protocols and tactical terminology. Elena realized that the pre-planned coordination procedures were too slow for the dynamic battlefield situation. The multinational artillery needed to respond immediately, but without proper coordination, they risked firing on each other or missing critical targets while enemy forces maneuvered freely. "Sir," Elena addressed Lieutenant Colonel Anderson, "request permission to implement emergency fire coordination procedures." Anderson looked skeptical. "What do you have in mind, PFC Hartwell?" Elena moved to the tactical display, pointing to specific grid coordinates. "Instead of routing all fire requests through national headquarters, we establish direct communication between battery commanders and assign specific sectors to each artillery unit. British guns take Sector Alpha, German guns take Sector Bravo, Canadian guns take Sector Charlie, American guns take Sector Delta." Captain Whitmore studied Elena's proposed solution. "That's quite irregular, Private First Class. It bypasses established command channels."
Elena maintained respectful military bearing while pressing her case. Sir, the established channels are creating 15-minute delays while enemy armor maneuvers freely. Direct coordination reduces response time to 3 minutes while maintaining deconfliction between allied units.
Major Weber examined the sector assignments Elena had sketched. The mathematics work correctly. Each sector assignment prevents overlap while ensuring complete coverage of the engagement area. Captain Dubois nodded approvingly. It's adaptive leadership responding to battlefield realities rather than rigid adherence to peacetime procedures. Lieutenant Colonel Anderson made the decision. Implement PFC Hartwell's emergency coordination procedures. All artillery units switch to direct coordination protocols. Elena's system transformed the battlefield dynamics immediately. British L-118 guns engaged enemy armor in Sector Alpha, while German PzH-2000 systems simultaneously suppressed infantry positions in Sector Bravo. Canadian and American M777 howitzers provided continuous fire support across their assigned sectors without interference or delay. The enemy counterattack, which had initially threatened to overrun Allied positions, was defeated within 30 minutes. Elena's coordination procedures had enabled multinational artillery to deliver synchronized fire support that would have been impossible using conventional command structures. Outstanding fire coordination, the radio crackled with praise from multiple national commanders. Allied artillery response was immediate and effective. Enemy forces neutralized across all sectors. Colonel Hayes observed the exercise from the Joint Command Center, taking detailed notes on Elena's performance. After the simulated battle concluded, she approached Elena for a private discussion. PFC Hartwell, Hayes began, your emergency coordination procedures demonstrated something that can't be taught in any classroom: the ability to innovate under pressure while maintaining diplomatic sensitivity to multinational partnerships. Elena stood at attention, but Hayes gestured for her to relax. The British captain was initially skeptical of taking tactical advice from an American private first class. The German major questioned whether battlefield improvisation was compatible with systematic planning. The Canadian captain was curious to see whether you could balance technical competence with cultural awareness. Elena waited for Hayes's assessment, recognizing that her performance during this exercise would determine her future opportunities in the artillery community. All 3 officers submitted evaluation reports recommending you for advanced international military education. Captain Whitmore specifically noted your ability to propose innovative solutions while maintaining respect for established military traditions. Major Weber praised your systematic approach to complex problems. Captain Dubois highlighted your diplomatic skills in managing multinational coordination. Elena felt a surge of professional accomplishment, but Hayes wasn't finished. However, there's something else you need to understand, Hayes said, her tone becoming more serious. Your performance at Fort Sill has attracted attention from senior Army leadership. There are discussions about assigning you to positions that would make you a symbol of women's capabilities in combat arms rather than simply recognizing your individual competence. Elena's expression hardened slightly. Ma'am, I prefer to be evaluated based on performance rather than symbolism. Hayes smiled approvingly. That's exactly the right answer. But you need to be prepared for the reality that exceptional performance by women in traditionally male roles inevitably becomes part of larger institutional conversations about military integration and gender equality. Elena understood the implication. Her success had transcended individual achievement and become part of broader military policy discussions that extended far beyond artillery tactics. Ma'am, what happens next? Hayes consulted her clipboard. Graduation from the Advanced Artillery Leadership course, promotion to specialist, and assignment to your choice of artillery units worldwide. But first, there's one final test, a solo fire mission that will determine whether you receive the Distinguished Graduate Award. Elena realized that her journey was approaching its culmination, but the final challenge would test every skill she'd developed in isolation, without the support of teams or the benefit of collaboration. The Distinguished Graduate Evaluation required Elena to operate alone for 24 hours, managing a single M77 howitzer and supporting an entire simulated battalion during the most complex fire mission scenario Fort Sill could devise. No team, no backup, no opportunity for consultation, just Elena, her artillery piece, and a communication system connecting her to multiple units engaged in desperate combat across a 50-square-kilometer battlefield. Elena established her firing position at Grid Square November 7-7, a hilltop location that provided maximum range coverage but also maximum exposure to enemy counter-battery fire. The isolation was both tactical and psychological. Success or failure would rest entirely on her individual competence, developed over 3 months of intensive training. General Patricia Morrison, commanding officer of the U.S. Army Field Artillery School, observed the evaluation personally. Morrison had risen through the artillery ranks during an era when women faced even greater institutional barriers, and she understood the broader implications of Elena's performance. A successful evaluation would demonstrate that the most demanding artillery positions could be filled based purely on competence, regardless of physical demographics. PFC Hartwell. General Morrison's voice carried 30 years of command authority. This evaluation simulates the most challenging artillery scenario possible: isolated forward position, multiple simultaneous fire missions, degraded communications, equipment malfunctions, and time-critical decisions that affect the survival of hundreds of friendly forces. Elena stood at attention beside her howitzer, every piece of equipment meticulously prepared according to procedures she'd memorized and refined over months of training. "Ma'am, I understand the requirements and accept the challenge." Morrison consulted her evaluation checklist. The scenario begins with dawn patrol contact and continues for 24 hours. You'll receive no assistance, no resupply, and no relief. Equipment failures will be introduced randomly to test your maintenance capabilities. Communications will be jammed periodically to test your ability to operate independently. Elena nodded crisply. "Roger, ma'am, I'm ready to begin." The first fire mission came at 05:47 hours, just as the eastern horizon began showing traces of dawnlight. Steel Rain 77, this is Charlie Company. Troops in contact. Enemy squad-sized element in tree line, grid 12345678. Immediate suppression required. Elena's hands moved with practiced efficiency, calculating the firing solution while simultaneously preparing the howitzer for action. Range, 6,800 meters. Target, personnel in concealment. Ammunition selection, high explosive with proximity fuse for maximum effectiveness against dispersed infantry. Charlie Company, Steel Rain 77. Shot fired, time of flight 38 seconds. The distant explosion confirmed accurate placement. Steel Rain 77, Charlie Company. Target destroyed, excellent shooting. But the evaluation had only begun. Over the next 6 hours, Elena supported 12 different units engaged across the training area. Each fire mission tested different aspects of her training. Danger close missions requiring absolute precision, moving targets demanding rapid calculation adjustments, and counter-battery fire against simulated enemy artillery that threatened her own position. At 11:34 hours, the first equipment malfunction occurred. Elena's digital fire control computer experienced a simulated failure that eliminated her automated calculation capabilities. She immediately switched to manual calculations using paper plotting charts and mechanical plotting instruments that most modern artillery soldiers had never learned to use. Steel Rain 77. This is Apache 6. Emergency fire mission. Enemy armor advancing on our position. Grid 876-4321. We need immediate direct fire support. Elena worked through the ballistic calculations by hand, her pencil moving rapidly across the plotting chart as she computed range, deflection, and charge selection without digital assistance. The manual calculations took 3 times longer than computerized solutions, but her mathematical training enabled her to maintain accuracy despite the pressure. Apache 6, Steel Rain 77, shot fired, direct fire mission, time of flight 26 seconds. Steel Rain 77,
Apache 6. Direct hit on lead vehicle. The enemy's advance halted. Outstanding gunnery. The evaluation continued relentlessly. Elena managed ammunition supplies, performed preventative maintenance on her howitzer, calculated meteorological corrections for changing weather conditions, and coordinated fire missions that required split-second timing. Her physical stamina, tested through months of conditioning, enabled her to maintain peak performance despite operating the 43-pound shells continuously for hours. At 1845 hours, 18 hours into the evaluation, Elena faced her most challenging moment. Communications jamming eliminated her radio contact with supported units just as multiple emergencies developed simultaneously across the battlefield. She could hear fragments of distressed radio calls breaking through the electronic interference, but couldn't establish clear communication with units requesting fire support. Elena made a decision that demonstrated tactical judgment beyond her rank and experience. Using her knowledge of unit deployment patterns and standard tactical procedures, she began calculating probable fire mission requirements based on incomplete information. When communications briefly cleared, she was ready with pre-computed firing solutions that could be implemented immediately. Steel Rain 77. This is Delta Company. Emergency close support needed. Grid 11-23344. Danger close, friendlies within 100 meters. Elena had already calculated the probable firing solution for that grid coordinate. Delta Company, Steel Rain 77, confirming danger close, friendlies 100 meters southeast of target? Affirmative. Enemy buildings were pinned down in the courtyard. Elena's pre-computed solution placed the rounds exactly on target while maintaining safety margins that protected friendly forces.
As dawn approached, marking 24 hours of continuous operations, Elena had fired 127 rounds in support of 43 separate fire missions. 0 ammunition failures, 0 safety violations, 0 missed targets. Her howitzer remained in perfect operational condition despite the intensive use. General Morrison approached Elena's position as the evaluation concluded, accompanied by Colonel Hayes and Sergeant Major Jackson. Their expressions were unreadable, but Elena noticed that Morrison carried a folder containing what appeared to be official documents. PFC Hartwell, Morrison began. In 30 years of artillery service, I've never observed a more comprehensive demonstration of technical competence, tactical judgment, and sustained performance under pressure. Elena remained at attention despite her exhaustion. Thank you, ma'am. Morrison opened her folder. Your evaluation scores exceed the requirements for distinguished graduate by the widest margin in Fort Sill history. But more importantly, you've demonstrated that artillery leadership depends on competence, not demographics. Elena felt the weight of accomplishment settling around her, but Morrison wasn't finished. Effective immediately, you're promoted to specialist and assigned as an honor graduate of Advanced Artillery Leadership Course Class 23-07. You're also being recommended for direct promotion to sergeant and assignment to the 1st Battalion, 82nd Field Artillery Regiment, the most demanding artillery position in the U.S. Army. Elena's mind processed the magnitude of what Morrison was offering. The 82nd Field Artillery supported the 82nd Airborne Division, America's elite rapid deployment force. Assignment there would mean combat deployments, advanced responsibilities, and leadership positions that would define her military career. Ma'am, I accept the assignment and the challenge. Morrison smiled with genuine warmth. There's one more thing, Specialist Hartwell. Your performance here has influenced Army policy regarding artillery assignments. Physical standards will now focus on job-relevant capabilities, rather than arbitrary measurements that don't correlate with battlefield effectiveness. Elena realized that her individual journey had contributed to institutional changes that would affect countless other soldiers. Her success had transcended personal achievement and become part of military evolution that recognized competence over convention. 6 months later, specialist Elena Hartwell stood beside her M777 howitzer at Fort Liberty, North Carolina, preparing for deployment with the 82nd Airborne Division. Her crew included soldiers who'd initially doubted her capabilities, but now competed for assignment to her gun section because of her reputation for exceptional accuracy and tactical innovation. The woman who'd been told she was too weak for artillery had become the standard by which artillery excellence was measured. Her record-breaking shell handling had been only the beginning of a journey that proved strength comes in many forms, and the most dangerous opponents are often the ones people underestimate. Elena had not just loaded shells faster than any man, she had redefined what strength meant in the modern military. And somewhere in Montana, her grandfather Thomas Hartwell read the newspaper article about his granddaughter's Distinguished Graduate Award, smiled with quiet pride, and whispered, "I always knew she had it in her." The artillery community would remember Elena Hartwell not for breaking barriers, but for setting new standards of excellence that transcended every limitation others had tried to impose. She had proven that when competence meets determination, assumptions crumble like targets under accurate artillery fire. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.